Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. This is Lesley Lykins with CXPA, and I am so excited to bring you another panel in our countdown to the 2017 CX Day. Today, we are talking about metrics, measurement, and ROI as it pertains to customer experience, and I have an incredible panel with me here. Before we get started, though, I did want to remind you of a couple of things. First and foremost, you have the opportunity to engage with this panel today, and I would encourage you to bring those questions forward. All you need to do is type them into the chat box there on your screen, and we'll bring your questions up to our live panel over the next 30 minutes. So please feel free to pop those questions in. I'd also like to remind you that this is just one of a series of panels and conversations and webinars that CXPA is hosting as we count down to Customer Experience Day, which we will celebrate next Tuesday, October 3rd, worldwide. So if you'd like to see more discussions like the one that you are observing right now, please feel free to check out those recordings at www.cxday.org. We encourage you to tweet and use the hashtag CXDay, and we'd like to particularly thank our many sponsors who make this worldwide celebration happen each year. And you can see those sponsors there listed on your screen. So without further ado, I would like to get us kicked off on our very important panel discussion today. I think that this is a topic that affects many, if not every, CX practitioner. And so I want to thank all of you for participating in this. We are going to have a conversation today about measures, metrics, and business value, and how you use those to demonstrate outcomes for the organization and the customer. Before we get started with a couple of questions that we have, I'd like our panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves. So Diane, will you kick us off and let us know a little bit more about yourself and how you got started in this?
Sure, yeah. How did I get started? Like everybody else, I came from a really different background. I started as a clinical psychologist, but quit doing that after a while and got into the business world. And I had a CEO who was just very inspirational and always thought customer centric. So I've worked in and with brands, Cisco Foods, AT&T, helping and really building my skill set for probably over 20-some years, I hate to admit it. So currently, I'm interim CEO for the CXPA, and really excited that all of you are here to join us today, because I think this is a great topic and one that is misunderstood, and I think people really are looking to learn more about.
Thanks, Diane. DeShaundra, how about tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. So DeShaundra Jones, I, like Diane, have a myriad of things in my background. I have landed in the utility industry and working across the footprint in Florida, Delaware, and Maryland as the Director of Customer Experience, focused on the voice of the customer, our voice of the employee, and some quality process and human performance improvements. So I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited. I've only been a member of CXPA for a short period of time. This is an awesome thing we're doing.
It's incredible work that you're doing, DeShaundra. Thanks for being here today. Thank you. Pat, let's go over to you.
Hey, Lesley. Pat Dawson. I started CongaCX Consulting in 2010. I'm a lifelong marketer. Most of my career was spent in and around customer relationship management. I reached a point where I thought that the ultimate solution was, in fact, the customer experience, not loyalty programs and database programs. So I made that switch and have been on the consulting side ever since. Love working with the CXPA, and especially love working with my clients.
And we are glad to have you in the CXPA, Pat, and glad you made that switch. So thank you for being here today. And Lynn, who is on the West Coast, so we've gotten her on board earlier this morning. But Lynn, please share with us your background, a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I thought that my career was going to be in brand management in a consumer packaged goods firm, but it's been taken a different turn when I started out in a strategic planning department of a company, and they wanted me to go and talk to customers and then figure out a customer satisfaction methodology. And this was back in 1991, believe it or not. And ever since, I've caught the bug on customer satisfaction and customer experience. So I was at Sunoco Products in South Carolina for 3 years doing that kind of work, and then I came to Applied Materials here in Silicon Valley, and I was in the corporate quality department trying to make sure that we would no longer be seen by our customers as being arrogant and hard to do business with. So it was definitely a very big culture push and very action-oriented and accountability-oriented. So customer experience metrics became part of my vernacular very early on, and something that we definitely put a lot of thought behind. So I'm glad to be on this panel and learn from others as well.
Thanks, Lynn. I just feel like this is such a very important topic, and I'm glad we're addressing it today. You know, within CXPA, we hear quite a few CX practitioners consistently asking questions about being able to demonstrate that business value. We know that customer experience has evolved from resolving issues to measurement, building consistency, and now engagement and renewed focus on creating value for customers and organization. I want to start with a pretty basic question, I think, first and foremost, but one that I think a lot of people have questions around. And Lynn, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between measures and metrics and value. So for example, where does the NPS or customer effort score fit when you're talking about value?
Well, those scores are in a hierarchy as I see them, because everything that you do is actually a flow. For example, when you create something, there's an output of it, and then the output gets seen by your customers, and the customers have a perception of it, and then the customers have a behavior because of that, and then your financials behave a certain way. So you need to be viewing these things as a kind of a chain link, several links in a chain. And so where I see customer effort score and net promoter score are in the kind of end part of the chain, just before the behavior or around the behavior and before the financials, but certainly after what we do in the company. And so looking at net promoter score as one component of many and one part of this, one link of this chain, I think is a very helpful way to figure out how to make change happen and show impact.
Pat, we always kind of lump in the metrics, measurement, and ROI. I feel like I say those three together quite a bit. but how do you differentiate? How do you tell people between the difference between value and measurement?
Yeah, it's a great question. Someone asked me the other day, what are the right metrics? And I said, well, let me ask you what your strategy is. And I think that's one of the challenges in CX. On the one hand, we know from studies like the Walker Report that CEOs are looking for a direct correlation between our CX activities and their corporate objectives and financial goals. On the other hand, we have to be realistic about what we're creating from a CX strategy standpoint, and I think align our metrics accordingly. So to Lynn's point, NPS, customer effort score may be very relevant, but to turn around and tell my CEO, well, I have a direct responsibility for that 4% sales increase in the fourth quarter, we have to be careful where we're going there. I think, number one, derive your customer experience metrics from your customer experience strategy.
Yeah, DeShaundra, in your role, how have you found those two things to be different, and how have you used the measures and measurement to show that, make that case for value?
Oh, this is a very timely and very interesting discussion that we're having. What I've found is, especially in the utility industry, I get a lot the question, why measure NPS? Because what is one of the questions I ask the customer is, well, I can't go anywhere. So the loyalty is built in, So what we are trying to do is show that there is alignment between that NPS and customer strategy or organizational strategy, meaning it's not just limited to loyalty. It's limited to, or it's expanded to brand value or program adoption and those types of things. So that's what we've been able to do. We've been able to have that discussion at every level in the organization, and I think that we're driving that home and then showing, the results at an executive level. That's been very helpful for us. But you're absolutely right. Pat hit it on the head. first have to have a strategy, and it can't be, you know, well, this is hot now, this is what Forrester said, or this is what Timken said, or, you know, I saw this in the Walker report, we're going to do this now. You really have to be very thoughtful and deliberate about what you know, your strategy is for your customer and internally.
Diane, how have you seen these two interact before? Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, it was at Cisco Foods, you know, it's a very operationally driven company, and so they were very focused on financials. While they understood Net Promoter Score or those things as being outcomes and kind of strategy, they're more outcomes, as Lynn said, of many things that happen in your organization. They're more directional. And they understood that, but what we had to do is go back and really look at, with our projects, what measures could we put in place to show true business value and financial results? And so that would be things like, you know, we modified our RFP process so that we increased our win ratio, and the customers were happy about it because they didn't have to go back and forth, and they were of good quality. And so we were able to show by changing experience, we actually did impact a financial metric that they were interested in. And so I think it's important to think about measures as kind of things you can count, because those are things that typically at some point, as Lynn said, thread up to a financial metric, whether it's revenue or cost, right? So, and I think that's what your executives are saying. They understand NPS, and they understand it as an outcome measure, but you got to get it down into the measures so that you can actually correlate that to something as an output that impacts the financial business case.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This next question, I feel like this one is, all of you who are watching are probably going to want to chime in with these challenges that you're facing, and feel free to chat those in the box, because I know you're going to be thinking them as we discuss them here. But DeShaundra, maybe I could start with you. What's your biggest challenge in telling your organization about the financial value of customer experience?
I'm going to pick one because this is 30 minutes, right? So I should say that we are a utility, and just by nature, we're regulated. We are not a fancy, we're not necessarily marketing in a forward-thinking, always function. So in showing them the let me step back. I've only been here, my role in this organization has only been there since the beginning of the year. So ahead of me, someone had to show them the value of customer experience. They certainly understood the value of customer service and a call center, but they didn't understand how all of those things, from a marketing, a communication, a customer-centric, how all those things tied in together. So what one of the challenges I'm facing now is, what's the difference between customer experience and customer service? And how is that going to impact us? What are you doing differently than our customer service group is doing? And how are you going to impact our operational bottom line? So I've been able to kind of show, you know, I always tell the story, well, customer service from a utility perspective would mean I call to start service. I talk to someone who has the best attitude on the phone, and I hang up. If I measure customer satisfaction at that point, then the score is going to be high. But from my perspective, the customer service piece of it was, how difficult was it for you to find the telephone number? How long did you have to stay on hold? Did they give you all the information you needed, and was that information accurate? Did the person get to your home when they said they would? Was your bill there when they said that it would get there, and did you understand it? That type of thing. And so it's an overall holistic approach that we're taking. Was the bill antiquated, or is the experience you're having with us likened to the experience you're having with your other utilities or other businesses that you engage with? So, you know, that's the story that I tell them, and that's the story that I keep telling. And so, you know, it's a continual road show, but we're breaking down barriers one door at a time. So.
I love that. I love how you are taking that step by step and just educating and opening eyes, and that's great.
And to Diane's point, I'll just say, and showing the value. There's no other way from a C-suite perspective to get buy-in than to show them the results of what you're doing.
Yeah. Yep. Pat, I'm going to look over at you and say, you know, what have you seen as far as those challenges when you're trying to demonstrate value of customer experience?
Well, I think to build on what DeShaundra was saying, it's really critical to focus leadership on a discrete set of metrics. And we all talk about how we came to our careers in customer experience from some other discipline. Well, that's also true of our CEOs and leadership folks. And I think it's key that we focus them on the metrics that matter from a CX perspective. There's a tendency in organizations to track legacy metrics. These are the things that we've always measured our company by, whether it's run rate or sales close rate, whatever it might be. And we may have a very discrete set of CX metrics. So how we present that, reinforce that. In my business, I like to meet with leadership once a month and review a CX balance scorecard with them. So it brings a focus, and it immerses them in CX, which is usually new to the executive wing.
Lynn, how have you helped others overcome that challenge of demonstrating the value of customer experience?
Well, I think that everyone who's spoken about this has been really, right on. We tend to think that when we have a customer, we're simply making a transaction of giving them our product or the service that they're getting and taking their money. And yet, who we're dealing with, even if it's a business, these are people. They're humans, and by having some kind of interaction like that, giving money and giving a product or service, there are feelings and expectations attached to both sides. And so what I think customer experience management boils down to is the same thing as business management, managing expectations. We do know that the C team, and especially your CEO, is super focused on managing Wall Street's expectations. And so that should not be a new thing. We have to manage expectations. But what we haven't really taken into account is that, like DeShaundra was saying, it just boils down to a lot of simple things. Did I get my bill on time? Was it easy to understand? Did I have to, do something in addition to giving the money because that wasn't, in the contract? So anytime that we're creating a hassle for customers, we're actually, creating costs for ourselves. And I think that also would be important to your CEO in terms of earnings per share, because that's something that Wall Street cares about as well. So I think speaking the language of our executives, but also bringing in these other elements of they're just plain facts. These are people, there are expectations that are associated with it on our side and their side, and the best thing to do is to think of how we can make things as smooth as possible, because there's always costs associated, and as those costs are reduced, then people also want to interface with us more, which is all about being promoted or recommended, and the effort scores and the money that is supposed to go with that. So thinking again in that chain link.
Yeah, good point.
It's interesting that you say that, DeShaundra. I was thinking about, how awesome it is you getting started in an organization. I know it seems like you're pushing the rock uphill, but I think about that sometimes with service. And to Lynn's point of when somebody has a struggle or they have an issue or something's difficult and they have to pick up that phone and call, that's raising costs at the company, right? And it's also frustration for the customer where they're losing value, they're losing time, and they associate that with the brand. And so those things are absolutely measurable, one from a cost perspective, but also from a loyalty and NPS perspective. So I think storytelling around that sometimes is a good way to do it. Give them examples like that where they can make it like it's relative to them. I think one of the things that we need to do is make sure these folks realize they're having experiences every day and they're thinking just like customers. So getting them to think back to what Lynn was talking about it really is about their experience they're walking away with that drives behavior. And that's what we're really trying to measure, and that's the impact to the business.
To your point, Diane, I would just add that the other thing we can't lose sight of is that our customers, the most powerful tool in advertising has always been word of mouth, and social media has scaled that. And so now as a customer, I'm empowered not only in my relationship directly with you, but my ability to influence others' relationship with you. And to DeShaundra's point about how it impacts brand value, it's significant with the increase in social media and the ability to reach out and make or break someone's day.
And expectations, just foundational expectations are really changing, right? You think about, I want the experience that I have, I'll just say with Amazon. I want it tomorrow, or I want them to bring it to me today. You know, you liken whatever organization you're dealing with, whatever service that they're providing, to what experiences you're having with other organizations, and you want that to be replicated across. And you're right, Diane, that really does tie to the bottom line. If I'm a customer and I have to call you multiple times, those are dollars tied to that. If I need to go to your location multiple times, there are dollars tied to that, and that's a very, very compelling story to tell.
I'm going to remind our audience that you have the opportunity to ask our panel your questions as well. If you're struggling with something at your organization around metrics or measurement or proving business value, go ahead and chat those into us, and we'll bring that to our panel and be happy to answer those questions as well. All right, so the next question I have for all of you is, what's one thing that you recommend our audience do to build this competency or skill set in value and financial impact? And Lynn, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think that the most valuable thing you can do is learn about process management, because if you can understand how processes work with the inputs and the flows within, and then the outputs and the consequences, now you're getting into exactly what metrics are all about. Metrics are about monitoring the efficiency and effectiveness of each step across the process. And the more you know about processes that lead into what customers experience, what customers actually see as touch points and the product and so forth, the more you can back up to the root issues that are behind the metrics that you're seeing. So I once saw a presentation by somebody who was doing a lot of interesting analysis from a financial side on what was going on with financials and their survey scores. And the thought came to me, but I went up afterward and just asked her, so this is really impressive how you've looked at these various models, and I understand you're kind of frustrated because it's not definitive yet, but my main question is there some operational change that's being made so that customers are actually experiencing something different? And I guess they hadn't gotten that far. And so if you want your metrics to change, you actually have to make something different for customers. And generally speaking, humans need to have obstacles removed before they can actually give you full credit for the the niceties or the icing on top. So a lot of times we'll do a lot of things kind of surgically toward improving Net Promoter Score or any other type of customer sentiment on the upside, just trying to get that lift and the revenue increase associated with it. What we overlook is that we may not even be getting full credit for that potential lift if there's still some hassles that are holding customers back. They may have a chip on their shoulder. Things are cumulative with expectations, as we know in every relationship. If you have a spouse or children, things are cumulative, and you've got to manage the thing holistically and not just these surgical lift elements.
Yeah, great point. Diane, how would you advise our listeners to build this competency skill set?
Go become best friends with your CFO. I remember, even though I have a business degree, I remember sitting with a CFO and talking through customer experience and some of the impact it could have, and making that person your friend who can help you build a good business case and look at all the things that you're impacting. Like I said with the RFP, process I described before, we were able to take, system collapses, we were able to take win rates, we were able to take productivity, so they can really help you to build that business case and use the language executives are used to using. And I think there's nothing more powerful than that. And once they understand the metric piece, they can help you put together that scorecard that Pat was talking about. So Pat, I'll let you take it from there.
Well, I think I like what Lynn says relative to the importance of understanding operational performance and metrics. I really try to shy away from a single metric. NPS, I think, is important, but it's not the whole story. We were working with a client recently that had an NPS, and it was aggregated across a series of customer journeys. And once we disaggregated it, we found we had very different scores than simply the one holistic one. So the CX Balance Scorecard, measuring both some operational internal metrics combined with customer-provided scores, we think gives a more holistic picture of the experience.
All right, DeShaundra, I'm gonna kind of switch it up on you just a little bit. What's the one thing that you'd recommend to the listeners that they do within their organization to create that link between CX and business value? And you've already given us a couple of examples.
Yes. I would say, focus on the X. I would say focus on the customer experience, the organizational experience, and then the human experience, so the employees. Diane mentioned becoming friends with those in the executive suite and making sure that they understand, the value. And then becoming friends with the employees so that they understand the value and that they're speaking the same language or a similar language. And not that it's just focused on the customer or just focused in the customer care or marketing or communications area, but every single person in that organization should be focused on the customer experience. So I would say focusing on the X. And if you tell that story, storytelling, it's so important. So you tell that story and get that buy-in and then produce, results from a business perspective. I think continually, folks will seem to understand. They'll get it.
Absolutely. Lynn, would you add anything onto that?
Well, I'm just a huge fan of what Pat was describing with the operational scorecard, so that you're seeing the connection between upward trends or glitches, dips and valleys and so forth on your operations compared to your customer sentiment or even certain drivers of customer loyalty, whatever you're using, Net Promoter or anything, and then Net Promoter. So having those layers on a scorecard are going to be really important to seeing the connections between things. Typically there's a lag of several weeks or even several months between the time that you do something operationally and the time that customers notice it well enough that it's showing up in those key driver ratings. And then, of course, the financial and other market consequences have a little bit of a lag as well. And so layering those scorecards can be really interesting. And I think that what DeShaundra was saying in terms of making friends with the C team, making friends with the other employees and so forth to help them see their role. Interestingly, the role of a customer experience leader manager is not so much analysis and running technologies or programs, but I think that the primary role is being a facilitator to show insights to all of these groups so that they can in turn take ownership and drive change that's necessary to keep up with the moving target that is also caused by these other industries that are doing things that change customers' expectations. So I just love it all so much, but becoming a facilitator and learning those influential skills is also very key to making a big impact or having that strong ROI show in your customer experience management.
Yeah.
And lastly, I'd just say quickly that potentially integrating that scorecard with the CX metrics, with the organizational metrics as a whole, will be extremely beneficial. So if there's a key metric or one or two key metrics from a CX perspective that you can get buy-in to roll up from an organization perspective, so everybody has quote unquote skin in the game, then that's also very important. We've been able to do that on a few metrics, and the goal is to continue that along. So I agree, Pat and Lynn, wholeheartedly with that.
Diane, you want to add any last comments, words of advice?
No, I think what everybody's talking about is really showing that more holistic picture about how everything that we do and what customers are doing, how all that threads together. I harken back to, I think people still use it, value mapping was a term where we said there's so many things that contribute to the outcomes that we're looking for and the impacts that we have, as Lynn was saying, you know, looking at your processes, looking at the outcomes of those. So just be diligent, learn about how to talk about the financial benefit and how to think about your measures and metrics in a very specific way, but take them holistically too, because over-focusing on one score won't get you anywhere, right? So.
Awesome. Well, I think you guys are getting off a little easy today with no questions from our audience, but I know that those of you who are watching continue to work through some of these struggles. Hopefully this conversation today helped you advance a little bit more, but if you are interested in speaking more about this topic, or if you want to learn from others, you know, take a look at the discussion forum at CXPA.org, and we've got a really significant community of professionals, just like Pat and Lynn and DeShaundra and Diane here today, that are there to walk through some of these things with you as well. I would like to very much thank all of you on our panel today. This is such an important conversation to the CX community, and I think that all of you just really rocked it out of the park. So thank you for helping us in this countdown to CX Day. I think that's the chime to call this to an end. But again, thank you all so much. This panel session is recorded, and it will be available for all of you to go back and view again if you'd like at www.cxday.org, along with all of the other panels in our series here as we count down to CX Day. If you have time, later on today we will have an incredible conversation between Diane and Chris Rios on hiring CX talent. And so if that is something that you're interested in, please feel free to tune into that conversation. It is later on today, and we look forward to more next week as we get closer and closer to Customer Experience Day on October 3rd. Thank you so much, Diane, DeShaundra, Pat, and Lynn, and I look forward to seeing you again on a future panel.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.